I remember when I first attempted to surf. I was at this beach, Ocean Beach, California, the West Coast. I was from the South, so it was a new experience for me. Growing up in the movies and in magazines and TV shows, I would see surfers and it looked so cool. And I had wanted to do it. We moved here and I decided that I was going to surf. Today was going to be the day that I was going to surf for the very first time. So when you go surfing out here on the West Coast, you have to wear this thing called a wetsuit. A wetsuit? What's that? I'm from the South. The Gulf of Mexico's there. The water is 80 degrees all the time, nice and warm. But out here, the ocean is freezing. Even during the middle of the summer, it's like 50 degrees. So it's cold. So you wear this wetsuit to keep you warm. I go to the beach and I look out all these cool surfers and they got their wetsuit on and they're buff and they got the muscles, they got hair and they look cool. And I'm like, well, I'm gonna put my wetsuit on. Maybe I'll look like a cool surfer dude. When I put on a wetsuit, I look like a toothpick swallowed a basketball. Can't tell, but I got a big belly and I'm skinny and bald head. I put it on, I felt like I was in a Ziploc bag and I can barely breathe. It's like smothering me, but I decided I was gonna do it anyway. And I go out to the beach in my wetsuit with my longboard that's like 9 or 10 feet long. So I look like a goofball, don't look cool like everybody else. So I got my board and I look out into the ocean and I see these big waves coming at me. I dip my foot in, it's freezing, even with the wetsuit it's cold, but I decide just to jump in. And when you go surfing, you have to lay down on the surfboard and paddle out to catch the wave. I go in and I'm lying on the board trying to paddle out through the waves. I can barely even balance myself on the board. Even before a wave comes, I fall over 2 or 3 times. I'm looking around to see if anybody can see me, but then I get up, I find my balance, and I start to paddle out. And when you paddle out, you have to go through the waves to go out and catch some waves. And a wave is coming at me, I'm not ready to surf it, and as I'm paddling out, I freak out, and I don't know what to do because as soon as the wave comes, I'm trying to paddle through it and it crashes into me and knocks me over. And I fall down, go into the water, almost lose my surfboard. So I try it again, bam, wave knocks me down. I'm like, how am I gonna do this? Over and over, this happens. A wave crashes into me. I can't even paddle out. I feel like a failure. Finally get to the point where I can go through the wave. And as I paddle out to the wave and I'm at my spot, I'm at my destination, I'm looking at the surfers to the right, the surfers to the left, and they got it going on. They can surf waves and do all kind of tricks, but my goal today is just to stand up on the board where I can catch a wave. So then I see the perfect wave, and it's a monster wave. It's coming right at me, and all I can see is this wave. And I'm like, I'm gonna catch it. So I turn my board around, paddle so I can catch it, and I can feel the rush of the wave pulling me in the surfboard. And I try to get up and stand up, and as soon as I do, I fall over. As surfers, phoom, and surfers this way, phoom, and I'm like, they're cool, I'm not. I felt like a failure, but hey, it's my first time. So I tried it again. Another sweet wave coming right at me. I see the wave, I wait for it, I wait for it, I wait for it, and I take it. And I'm gonna stand up this time. I get on my board and I try to stand up and boom, I fall down again. I can hear the surfers laughing at me. They're like, who's this guy? But I'm determined to surf today, to catch a wave today. I start to feel like a failure and I start to doubt myself, but I attempt again and crash. I attempt again and crash. I attempt again and crash and crash. And then finally I get up on a wave and I start to stand up for about 2 seconds, right? And I look like I'm a toddler and I can barely walk. And then bam, I fall over and over and over again. I still haven't caught a wave. I couldn't do it. I told all my family and friends that today was the day that I was gonna catch my first wave. And I was gonna do it. I felt like a failure. I felt like I had let myself down, had let my family and friends down. For me, it was an epic fail. Have you ever felt like a failure? Maybe you experienced an epic fail in your life. You try hard at something, but you keep messing up. You keep failing. No matter how hard you try, it just doesn't go your way. This is my failure cup. And the holes in this cup represent some of the failures that I've experienced in life. One is when I studied really hard in math and kept getting bad grades on my test. No matter how hard I tried, I ended up failing. And I actually got a D in the class at the end of the semester, even though I applied myself the entire time. The next one is when I wrestled the #1 guy in my weight division. I was on the wrestling team. Towards the end of the match, I was beating him by 1 point. And in the last 10 seconds of the match, all I had to do was hold him down on the ground and I would have won. It would have been a big upset. But I messed up. I didn't believe in myself enough. I let go of him and he escaped, which gave him a point. We went into overtime and he beat me in overtime. I was this close to beating him. I felt like a failure. The next one is when I was in 5th grade and I was reading a book in front of the entire class. And believe it or not, at that time, I was scared to death being in front of people. So when I was reading the story, I kept fumbling on my words and I could hear little giggles in the classroom and I couldn't even get through one paragraph. I felt like a total failure. Did you know that the Bible is filled with people who made mistakes, with people who make bad decisions and mess up? For instance, there's a guy in the Bible, his name's Peter, and he was one of Jesus' close disciples. Not only a close follower of his, but a close friend. They were sitting at the dinner table called the Last Supper with his followers, his closest ones. The night before Jesus was going to go die on the cross, at the dinner table, Jesus points out that one of them was going to disown him. One of them was going to say that they never even knew him. Jesus pointed at Peter and mentioned it was going to be him. When Peter heard this, he said, "No way." In Matthew chapter 26, verse 35, Peter says, "Even if I have to die with you, I will never disown you." But in like 35 verses later, just hours after that, Peter does exactly that. He denies even knowing Jesus. And not only once, but 3 times. And oftentimes that's what happens. We say we're going to do something, but we don't do it. Or we try not to do something, we try not to sin, and we end up sinning anyway. And when we do, we feel like a failure. How about you? Has it ever happened to you? So check this out. Even though Peter messed up and failed, Jesus, out of his love and compassion, he still gave him a second chance. After he denied knowing Jesus, Jesus went on the cross and died. He died so that we could all have a relationship with God through Jesus. 3 days later, he resurrected and came back to life and spent 40 days with his followers, hanging out with them and teaching them. And it was during this time that he had a heart-to-heart conversation with Peter. And he asked Peter, "Do you love me?" Peter replied, "Yes, Lord, I do." He asked him this 3 times, and each time, Peter's response was the same. Peter said, "Yes, I do. I love you." It was a way for Peter to ask for forgiveness. But then check this out. Even though Peter messed up, Jesus said, "Peter, I have a vision for your life. I have a plan for your life. I'm going to use you to start churches all around this area. And I'm going to build the church on you. You are going to be called the Rock." Even though Peter was a failure and he messed up, God still used him to do amazing things. Peter was just like you and I. He's a cup filled with holes, filled with failures. But God still used him to do mighty things through his failure. Now that's good news. Because if Jesus used a failure like Peter, he's going to do the same thing for us. We mess up, we fail, we make mistakes, but God will still use us to do amazing things. He still has a plan for our lives. Now I have a question for you. Why do you think God would use a failure like Peter to build his church? And I want you to talk about it with a person next to you, or maybe a group of 2 or 3 friends that are sitting next to you. Think about that and talk about that together. Why would God use a failure to build his church?